You would. Not many people are going to know who you are if they just pick up this tape, so I need you to identify yourself. Go ahead.
I'm Father Ed O'Brien, former pastor of St. Matthew's, now stationed here at White House on the Mississippi River. I give retreats and remember with great gratitude my time at St. Matthew's.
Okay. Let's see. I think I'm going to talk to you. I'll talk to you on this side of the camera. Always something to remember. I did a terrific interview 2 weekends ago with a woman who's a parishioner down at St. Matthew's, and it was a wonderful interview, and she was eloquent, and she was terse in that, I didn't have to wait for a long time to hear what she wanted to say. And I got done and walked over to take her microphone off, and it had been laying on the pew next to her the entire time. These things, they're not supposed to happen, but we all make mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
I make some big ones. Yeah. Here's the first thing I want to know. It wasn't until a few years ago that I came back to church, and it was because of St. Matthew's. I've been away for 30 years. One of the things that I heard that I thought was a really important thing for people to hear was this statement: you should live the life you profess. Now, for people like me who live in Kirkwood, go downtown, and for the audience who's perhaps wondering who cares about St. Matthew's, why is the phrase "live the faith you profess"? Does it have any value in that context? What do you think?
Does St. Matthew's have any value in the faith context?
Yeah.
Well, I think not only St. Matthew's, but I think the black community has a lot to say to the church. And the thing that always struck me was I try to remember, what did I learn when I was down there for 6 years? Well, I think what the people taught me was about hope. I mean, I believe, and they believe, but if you've ever been down there and lived there, you begin to feel the weight of what it means to be marginalized. And you'd think these people, their worship would be kind of resentful. It would be mad at God. It would be something like that. And it's not. They just quit believing in everything else except God. They don't believe in anything else. And it's wonderful. They all dress up like they've just been risen from the dead when they come to church on Sunday. And they have these marvelous hats that just make the place come alive. And I suppose the hope is expressed in their music. It can point out the real difficulties of life. You can hear Lord Have Mercy in ways you've never heard it before down there. But it ends up with a great joy in God and hope in God. And I suppose the thing I learned from places like St. Matthew's is the indestructible hope of that community that comes from their faith. So I had a lot to do with the gospel choir, young gospel choir down there, and the adult choir down there, and the children's choir down there, and all of this singing and joy and expressions of anguish and pain and suffering, and yet the resolution of it in hope. It's really something.
That's why I went down there. I think maybe you just put your finger on it. It's really hard today to live. We're almost taught to be psychotic today in society. We hear people raise Jesus and God up as we need to emulate, and then we say, but we'd rather that he agrees with us than we agree with him. And that's the way we're going to live our lives. And it's difficult to do. Walking into that church, for me, sort of lifted that. It was, as Hemingway used to describe, one thing we all needed to teach kids was that they needed to have shit detectors, crap detectors. And you can have that without becoming cynical, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Oh, they know when someone's not being truthful. They know immediately when someone's prejudiced. I mean, they know when someone's putting them down mentally. And I suppose the thing you learn about a place like that is they teach you how to pray. I remember a friend of mine I went to high school with, he and his wife wanted to know what I was doing. We were on the board at St. Louis U together. And he said, "What are you doing now?" I said, "Well, I'm pastor down St. Matthew." He said, "Well, how is it?" I said, it's something that just is beyond belief. It's just made my whole life different. And I've been to a lot of places, done a lot of things. I said, the only way to explain, just come to Mass. You'll understand it when you come to Mass. So he and his wife came down to Mass, and I was standing at the door saying goodbye to everybody when they left. And she was just weeping. And I said, and he said to her, "Well, Mary, why are you weeping?" She said, "It's so beautiful." I said, "That's right.
Yeah.
That's right."
What does a place like that have to teach us? I went to St. Louis U.
Oh, yeah.
I went to the class of '68. What does that have to teach us white boys who went to school, pretty much run the city, at least through our neighborhood networks? What does a place like St. Matthew's have to teach us who don't live in that circle?
Well, when I went down there, I'd never lived with the black community before. I'd never been a pastor before. And so the first parish council meeting was really interesting for me. Because here all these people were wonderful leaders of this community. I mean, really great leaders of the black community. And it was just something special. And so I told them right off the bat, I said, "Well, I've never been a pastor before." Oh, they said, "Don't worry about that. We'll teach you everything you got to know." And I said, "Well, I've never been in a black community before." And they said, "Oh, don't worry about that. You'll come to really love us." Well, that was really true. That was the truest thing I heard the whole time I was there. And we spent a lot of time together. A lot of time. They were going to close the parish. We had to work all that out. And then we formed this young gospel choir. And the adult choir were very supportive. But tested them, see if they really wanted to do this. And they made them better by doing it. They were really good. And I went around to practically every church in that part of the city. All these different churches that are down there. And this gospel choir sang. They sang for the Pope again. They were just beyond belief good. And this adult choir was beyond belief good. Some of them are dead now. They were really wonderful. And a woman there grew up as a Baptist, Mrs. Baptiste. And she was blind. And the choir director drove a taxi cab and used to go and pick her up every Sunday and bring her down. And some of the guys used to stand at the back of the choir when they were singing. They says, because Miss Baptiste is really going to get wound up, and she'd sing these old Baptist hymns. And I mean, it was just soul lifting. It was just wonderful. And then she'd fall out. And I thought, and they'd catch her, then she'd be all right, she'd be fine. But she just reached the peak of union with the Lord, and lifted everybody else up into that union. And you'd say, well, what's the value down here? The value is beyond belief. Beyond belief. You got to figure the whole movement to find some kind of liberation for the black community came out of their churches, came out of their hymns, came out of their hope, an indestructible hope. So I learned a lot down there, mostly how to pray, how to have hope.
Boy, what more can you ask out of life?
Yeah, that's right. That's why it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. I guess one of the things that is important, that will be important for people who are watching us who don't know anything about St. Matthews, mostly we're a Highway 40 community.
Yes.
You know, we go
Yes.
from west down to the river. Why should anyone? This church is it? What's the church that I passed on?
Oh, I'm Christopher.
Yeah.
That's Mary Queen of the Universe.
Mary Queen of the Universe. I was thinking Mary Queen of Peace. Mary Queen of Peace. Why should these folks in these parishes care?
Well, they don't know how to care. I knew a lot. I taught for 10 years at St. Louis U High. And some of those young people that I taught, they'd ask me, what can they do? And I said, well, there's a lot of people down here who aren't going to have anything to eat or give away for Christmas. And so they would want to know the names of the kids and the families and what they needed and how old were they. And then they'd take their children and go into a Target store and buy all that stuff for these and wrap it and put their names on them and everything. And we weren't changing the world. But then they'd drive down with their children and stop at the parish, and we'd stack it all up. And one day I get some of the parishioners to go around to these really hurting human beings and just bring a real sense of joy and peace into their life, because they were going to have a great meal today and they were going to have gifts for their children. And a lot of them were single mothers. But how do you, what would ever bring you down there? Well, it's like Bishop Stibe used to say. He says, well, it's a ghetto, and it's been put there by the community they live in. And so he says, don't come down here unless you're going to do something. Don't come down to look at us. He completely identified those people. He was a wonderful bishop, is a wonderful bishop. And but many people wanted to come down and do things, but didn't know how or what to do. And so it's a difficult thing. How do you come to a people and be with them and support them and still let them have what they have? You know, we can learn so much from them. I learned a tremendous amount from them.
You know, one of the things that I think people, you've been down there. Do you remember when was the Kiss of Peace a big deal when you were there?
Oh yeah.
I mean, yeah. So it's a catharsis to even though you could do that before church and after church, to be allowed to be suggested and to be motivated to embrace is a very powerful thing for people, and we do it. You know, we embrace everyone. The church I should go to is St. Peter's out in Kirkwood, and I have nothing against parishes per se, but it's a jam-packed church filled with strangers who show up for their 2 hours, less than 2 hours a week, and I don't judge that. It's just that it doesn't catch me. What do you think might catch people if they came to visit?
Well, they meet a community that's very small, first of all. There's probably only about 20,000 black Catholics in St. Louis. And so that's why they had to merge all those churches. There just weren't enough people to keep them all going.
Yeah.
And the neighborhoods went into great decline for a while, and people moved out. And there's some little resurrection coming back again through the efforts of Father Hutchison and his board, which are members of that community. And so I think the difference is that you have people that have suffered together, have struggled together, who have supported one another. They have a whole life and and thing they share that no one else can get into. You know, it doesn't do any good to go down there and think you're going to be part of that experience. You can't be. There is no way for you to be that. But they can teach us so much because of that experience. But they take care of one another. They look out for one another. They try to take care of all the kids. The kids get to the point where they won't let anybody take care of them. But I mean, they have to make their own decisions, you know. But you'll see children are just wonderful down there and being cared for in just a wonderful way. And yet they face this, they receive so much love and care when they're little. It's just unbelievable. And then they walk out of that neighborhood. The only thing they know is that neighborhood. They walk out of that neighborhood and they experience something different. They experience themselves as someone people fear or don't know. One guy told me, I said, well, what's the hardest thing? He says, to be ignored when you're walking down the street. They don't ignore each other. They always hail each other. They always have time to stop, talk. Nobody's in a big hurry. And yet they got a lot to do. So there's a different value system inside of the community because of what they went through segregation. St. Louis is a highly segregated city. And so they